Good afternoon, everyone. How are y'all doing?
Good.
All right, you're going to be interactive today, so how are you?
Good.
Oh, come on, one more time. How are you doing today?
Fine.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm Renee Cambiano,
I'm Carl Farinelli.
and we're going to start off with an activity to get us all kind of in the same mindset, okay? I've handed out a 3x5 card like this and a crayon or two, depending on how many you wanted. And I'm also going to walk around and ask you to just kind of smell the crayons. Because I want you to kind of create an environment in your head. When you smell crayons, you have crayons in your hand, it kind of takes you back, right? Where does it take you? Grade school, right. We want you to think about a fantastic, awesome educator in your life. And either write one word about them, or you can draw a picture, but something that represents that person. And Nikki Jones over there.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikki Jones. I'm a graduate assistant in the Higher Education Leadership Department under Dr. Renee Cambiano. I'm glad to assist these two intellects today.
We have Mike Allen. Mike, wave to everybody. Mike has been working here, I think, as long as I have. Have you been here 30 years, Mike? And we've done so many things. We've been there supporting each other for years. He's a fellow musician, and even though he tends to play traditional Celtic music a lot, but he likes blues, and he's done Bob Wills music, Oklahoma, a lot of Oklahoma tunes. He played, what role were you in Take Me Back to Tulsa? Jesse Ashlock?
Yeah.
Jesse Ashlock. He played Jesse Ashlock in the play that played here for 2 years and at Guthrie for 2 years, Take Me Back to Tulsa, about the life and times of Bob Wills in the 30s.
So who wants to share either your picture or your word?
For those of you that are going to catch up,
Sorry.
just write down something about your favorite teacher. It can be a drawing, it can be a word.
We can use crayon.
Sniff the crayon. We had a little reminder of elementary school. Of course, it might not have been an elementary teacher.
Who wants to share? Don't. All right.
I put interactive.
Interactive. Is that when you smelled the crayon and started, was it a formal teacher that you're describing as interactive? Like in grade?
English teacher.
So it wasn't a mother or it was family, it was a English teacher?
And English teacher.
That was for Dr. Green. Sure, I was grammatically
It was
correct.
a English teacher.
Who else wants to share? Interactive.
But inspirational.
Inspirational. Again, was it a formal teacher or a family friend?
Formal teacher.
Formal teacher.
A smile.
Smile. Wow, just draws you in, doesn't it?
Yeah, there was something about her, third grade, middle Georgia.
She just would smile and just pull you right
Yeah, I
in.
mean, she's just a wonderful teacher.
Anyone else?
Motivating.
Motivating. Was that a formal teacher? Or? So everybody's thinking about a formal. Did anyone not
I
think of
started the other way, but
You started the other way, but it ended up in a classroom. Anybody not think of a formal classroom teacher? Carl, what was your word?
Granny. I was Granny's boy.
So she was your most amazing
We
teacher.
were each other's favorite people, and she was my teacher. She told me everything that was wrong about the stupid things that people in our family would say. Being from the Deep South, the stupid stuff we would hear. So she would straighten me out about what she would say. Well, I've read that Bible several times, and it doesn't really say that.
So mine would be unconditional,
Yeah.
because there's been a lot of people in my life that have supported me unconditionally, especially educators. Today we're going to talk to you about a journey that Carl and I have
Mapped,
started,
observed.
walked along.
Yeah.
And it's about those people that walk with you and this journey that we take from inward, outward, and inclusiveness with others. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
When I was a boy, the people that raised me were, I thought, they were a different relation to me than I found out when I was 26 than they really are. I was adopted by my aunt and my cousins. I didn't know that. So my aunt, I called her Granny because all the other kids called her that. My cousin Kitty, who everybody called Gypsy Kitty because she was always traveling, and not only from man to man but from place to place. But I called her Mom because she didn't have any kids, so she kind of wanted me to be her kid. But she was kind of dangerous and liked to do dangerous things, so I learned very quickly that Granny was the safer person to be around. Okay? And then there was Aunt Lily, who was kind of a crusty, mad at the world person who also protected me and looked after me. I asked her one time, did she ever think she would get married again? And I can't even tell you what her answer was, but it was, she indicated that anything a man can do for her, she can do for herself, basically, but she didn't say it that way. But that was my Aunt Lily, you know. So she was she was a person that would tell me all the family secrets if I would come to visit her with a bottle of Jim Beam, some Coca-Cola bag of ice, and some Dominoes. After about 3 hours, she'd tell me anything I wanted to know. So that was how I found out where I really came from. So it was an unusual family, but one of the things that impressed me most was something that my granny gave me when I was 7 years old. I was whining about how hard it was and why, you know, did some kids have indoor restrooms and running water, and why did we have to travel from school to school and do migrant farming in the spring and the summer and the fall, and only got to be home in Arkansas, over in Booker County, Arkansas, and Bohanna Mountain, only about 2 or 3 months of the year. And why, how come I only went to school 2 or 3 months a year? You know, and she just stopped. She said, I could never tolerate a whining man-child. And so she said, remember, every day is a blessing if you can figure out how to be somebody's blessing. And I was 7. I thought, that's hard. That's tough, Granny. You know, but that was her message. And that has wound up being a gift, because I've been able, after dropping out of high school, going to Job Corps, getting a GED, and then getting my associate arts, meeting my sweetheart 49 years ago at Blinn Junior College in Breno, Texas, learning her Texas German ways from her: efficiency, hard work, don't make excuses, don't whine, and getting my degree in my weakest area, learning that I could speak standard American dialect, that there were back vowels in my mouth, that it's not effeminate to enunciate. You know, you don't have to just talk like this and say yins. That it's okay to speak standard American English. It's okay to be excellent in more than one culture. It is okay to show your intelligence. And it's okay to stand up to bullies. And after you try to either stay away from them, escape from them, talk them out of it, it's okay to learn tools how to sometimes just knock them out of them, right? And so I learned this journey from, first of all, surviving for me, but then going back to my people as a teacher. Wei Shiba, the inventor of Aikido, said, you go through the world, and if there's evil, you have your sword ready. But if you see the goodness in their heart, then you have an embrace also ready. And so, you know, I'm a warrior for peace. You know, I've marched with when I was 17, I was down in Austin marching with my Native American, my African American, my Hispanic, my white, my gay brothers and sisters. I've been tear gassed by the KKK, and they don't scare me. You know, so, you know, if you die doing the right thing, then it's been a good life. And so, every day is a blessing if you can figure out how to be someone's blessing. I learned that when I was 7, and that was the greatest gift from the greatest teacher I ever knew, my adopted granny. So, we want to ask you, has there ever been someone in your life, teacher or otherwise, who suddenly caused you to look at things differently?
And this would be an interactive moment. Reminder.
Someone who took away an old idea that didn't work anymore, or reinforced an old idea that you needed to be reminded of.
Thinking when you want to start out that conversation.
Anybody wants to go first? Okay, as an educator, I also think of grandmother. Crayons would go to childhood. My grandmother taught me a lot. I grew up mostly around her home. Cherokee being my first language until I went to public school. So she was very influential, not only in life lessons, which is important to cultural and tradition, but she stressed education. So I'm probably here today because she always said, go to school. You know, just go to school. There's not many terms in Cherokee, but she didn't speak English, but she would always say, go to school. And so education was very important. Although uneducated, it was important for my generation, and that's where it takes me, and here I am.
Anybody else want to share that shift or that thought?
Right here.
Dr. Jones, he teaches supply chain here, and he taught us the value of essentialism. You don't have to do everything, but you should do what you're good at and do that to the best of your ability.
So that just, did it shift your?
Changed everything.
Wow.
I was in high school and I did 5 sports and every organization I could possibly be a part of to try to make myself important. But that didn't make myself important, it made me tired. So you find out what you're good at and you do that to the best of your ability.
Wow, what a huge life lesson. Wow.
I was scraping calf pins in Escondido, San Pasqual Valley, Escondido, California, on the Conine Dairy. And I was cleaning calf pins, and that came to me that I'd always heard my granny basically say, no matter what you do it well. So I did it well.
Anybody else? Freddie?
I think for me, my junior high Native American art teacher was the first that sticks out to me, and probably for a few different reasons. One, he was one of the first teachers in my life that kind of looked like me, and I'm local, and so even that may seem strange to some people. But looking back, he was all of the things that you mentioned, and I'm sure that I had lots of other teachers that were kind and inspirational and unconditional and everything else. But the one thing that made him different was for me, I could find myself in formal education, and it wasn't me having to leave myself to become a part of formal education, as much as the two could work together. And it wasn't until very recently that I made the connection, working on my ed research last semester in higher ed leadership, I think that is a connection for people, and a connection that is often neglected or overlooked unintentionally. And that may have been the inspiration for that research, and it just took me a little while to recognize it.
That is such a huge life lesson. And believe it or not, we hadn't talked prior to this, but it's an excellent lead-in to our conversation about this journey.
She's not a plant.
No.
Do I go now or?
We'll pay you later.
Yeah.
Carl and I were sitting one afternoon, as we often do, and having conversations about this journey that students take in learning or students take in leadership. And what does that look like? And what should it look like? And, you know, there's classical books out there, and I will be honest, I'm not trained in leadership. I'm trained as being an educator. So I can't spout those off like Carl can. He is trained in leadership. But there's all these models, but do they really reflect how I am as an educator or as I am as a leader? So we were having this conversation, and he said to me, well, what do you think about this model or that model? And I said, let me tell you what the journey looks like for me as an educator. Because I see myself as an
This is
educator.
her drawing of what we talked about.
He said, what? I said, okay, this is what I do in my learning styles class. Before we can move forward, I have to get some ownership. People out there go, learning styles, that's 70s stuff, right? I get students all the time to say that. That doesn't mean anything. You can't use learning styles. I'll show you the research that says it doesn't really work. Okay, it doesn't work. Challenge taken. So in that class, as he was pulling this out of me, what do you do, Renee? Say, okay, first we take the learning styles test. Because I want you to know how you learn. Because if you can understand how you learn, you can help others learn, right? That's empowering to know how you learn. And the sad thing is, in education, we don't even really, a lot of the time, talk about how we learn. We assume we know how to learn. So that process is very inward. And Carl was like, then what happens, right? I said, well, I don't know. That little journey right there takes a little bit of time. You become very introspective. You start talking about how you learn and questioning it, right? That's a little journey in itself. And you might question the instrument. I hear this from students all the time. Well, the BE says that I'm visual, but I don't think I'm visual. Really? Why not? Talk about it. Bring it out. Pull it out. Well, how do you learn? Yeah, it's just an instrument that somebody made, and maybe it's not accurate. What is important to me is that you start that journey in here and start figuring it out. And we can apply these skills to anything we do, right? It's not just about learning. It could be leadership. We do it in cooking. We go, I can make that. Follow the recipe and go, next time I do it, I'm gonna, what? I'm gonna adjust it. So we do it in all kinds of places. So this self-discovery starts to happen. And then something unique starts to happen. We start bringing in others. How'd you learn? How do you learn? Oh, that's different than me. Oh, you're the same as me. We both are verbal kinesthetic. Dr. Green and I have this conversation all the time. She's auditory. I always forget that. No, teasing you. Anyway, so it's bringing in others, right? We do that naturally. I can see you guys are all kind of coming in. I like it. I like it. So from there, we should start to respect our differences. And how I use this in the learning styles class is it's through a contract. You can learn through your preference, but you can't interfere with others' learning. Dr. Green, bobbing that head. So you have to have this respect. But what you said is so vital, and that is not losing who you are in the process, right? You can't let go of that. Carla and I have had this conversation because I'll say, I don't look like them, I don't act like them, I don't dress like them. Meaning administrators, right? I don't want to lose who I am in higher ed or who I am as an educator. That's so easy. If that happens, what happens in our process, you go back to the beginning. So what I wanted to share with that is this is a very fluid, growing process.
One of the things that we've also discussed at this point, and I want you to really be thinking about this, how do you find common ground with people that don't look like you? If you were to have a wood sculpt, you might know what a wood sculpt is? And you come from,
I don't know that.
from
What
the
is
back-
that?
You may come from this part of the country or 3 counties east of here. It's a nice name for an illegitimate child, okay? So if anybody have a wood's colt come out of the woods,
Oh, Wood's colt.
a wood's colt.
I thought that was one word.
Yeah, if wood's colt wander
Wood's
up out of the woods, would it matter what he or she looked like before you would nurture and raise that person who needs you, right? So that's kind of in my family, that's an important paradigm because we have lots of people raising other people's kids. And the ladies that raised me didn't really like guys very much, but they tolerated me and I learned to be sweet to them and started respecting the feminine leadership style, and so I survived. They let me live. And the situation that you find yourself in, sometimes you go around other people and you'll say the wrong things. You know, I catch myself if I put on my Western boots and my jeans and I drive across the Arkansas lines and I start saying yins again. And you know, I'll say, you know, them shoes are cute, you know, or something like from the language that I spoke as a child, because that's my language. My first language is backwoods hillbillyonics. So, first time I took my bride up to meet my people, we stopped at a little service station on the old State Highway 74 before it was paved, and pulled off at Rimmel and Bertus Lawson's service station. And Rimmel came out and said, "Oh, looky here! Oh, Bertus, it's Carl and his little bride! Oh, Young's come in! Young's come in!" We go in, Bertus has her chewing tobacco, dripping down her lip, and actually dip snuff, that's it. Okay. And she gives my wife a big, juicy kiss, you know. First thing that happened. They invited us to sit down and to have some coffee, and Rimmel starts talking about how I used to haul hay for him and all the different stories he had about me being mischievous and things of that sort. And we go out after about 20 minutes, we get in the car. By the way, it was an old standard shift. How many of you know where reverse was on a standard shift?
No.
There we go.
Down.
Sue Ellen's spirit is here. So you've got
Yes.
some of you are reaching for it because you're tactile. Some of you are looking for it because you're visual. Some of you are saying the words to yourself and you're looking for the sheet that you can read the words on. And so that was her trick. You know, it was her way to kind of get a first indication. But you can't say 3 on the tree anymore with younger people because nobody has ever heard that term, right? Nobody knows about a standard shift on the column. But that was a big deal back in the early 50s.
Up
Yeah, see, the
here.
tactical person's reaching for it. So that was towards you and up, right? Okay. And so I'm pulling out of the driveway in my old Chevy with the 3 on the tree, and Catherine socks me in the shoulder. And I said, "What?" And she said, "Making fun of those old people that way." Because I was speaking in my childhood dialect that she had never heard me speak in before. She had married a hillbilly kid who had learned to speak her dialect in college, who had become an English major to get over all of his weaknesses, and who had developed back vowels in speech class and in drama, and in German had learned real, back vowels in hinter in der Mund, yeah, way back in the mouth. And so I had done all the things I needed to do to be excellent in that culture, but when I went home, I did not speak down to my people. I spoke to them in our language, but I forgot to warn my new little bride that she was married to a hick. So I got solid. And I said, what? She said, making fun of those old people like that. I said, oh, Lordy, you're about to have an interesting week in Booger County on Bolena Mountain. I need to tell you some things. Maybe I should have told you this already. That's the way my people speak. And so that was a very early example for me, where as a young teacher, teaching high school English, that I realized, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to be excellent in more than one culture. I'm working in inner city schools in Houston. Maybe I'll be more successful if I start looking for excellence and celebrating more than just the culture I went there to teach.
And I think that's an important note right there, because as we were having this conversation about what is this process, we kind of settled on this respect for individual differences for a while. We didn't move past this for quite some time.
We threw tolerance out the window.
We threw, yeah,
And putting
we
up
talked
with it.
about tolerance and the negative, how that feels when you say, well, I tolerate you. But we also think that this is a pivotal point in the journey too, because people make a decision if you're going to accept others' differences or not.
Let's give credit here. When Dr. Joseph Falls, some of you may have known Dr. Falls, whose grandfather was Lakota Sioux, when he came over and looked at this model, and he's a Greek and Latin scholar, we were asking him for the best word to describe some points along here. He said, y'all need to put common ground in here. So he gave us that to add to the model. He said, at that point, you're not going to get past that model if you don't find common ground, that there are good people in all cultures, and they do certain things alike, like care about others. That you find that in every philosophy and religion. You know, caring about the others, where it's metakwe yasin, whether it's gadugi, whether it's love thy neighbor as you love yourself, if it's being a good Samaritan, whether it comes from Old Testament, New Testament, Lakota stories, Cherokee stories, it doesn't matter. Loving and caring about others outside yourself is a common ground. That's one of the big common ground items, isn't it? And so he said, you know, we're going to have to footnote him on that one, because that's a Dr. Falls item from his culture.
So after we settled on this pivotal point, and I really like that on our whiteboard that it's in the corner, because it kind of represents how we sat there for a while. Because I'm an educator, we started having conversation about an individual's journey in the learning process, and you see that with differentiated instruction. That's basically just teaching students the way they learn, and then going from individual learning to group learning. And then we settled on the next spot, which was this instructional ecology. And we started having a conversation about how a classroom or an institution or an organization has an ecology. That even like if you're thinking about higher ed, colleges, so the College of Ed, College of Business and Technology, they can have their own little ecology that is working off each other. And what does that look like if you can lower what we call in higher ed silos, right? Have some cross conversation. So we started talking about what does that look like in instruction, and aligning instruction vertically and horizontally, or in leadership. How do you communicate with those individuals within your own building or in your own department? We sat there for a little while too, didn't we, Carl? Because
we visited a bunch of stories there, cultural stories, because societies that didn't have written languages were still smart. And so they recorded these ideas that worked for their cultures, in their songs, in their dances, in their stories, in their paintings. And so just because they couldn't write it down or develop a written curriculum doesn't mean that those people weren't very wise, doesn't mean they were stupid. And so just because you didn't have a written literature doesn't mean that you didn't have a literature. Sometimes it was a song as literature, or a story as literature, or paintings as literature, or dance movements. You know, some African cultures had sex education in their dances that young men and young women didn't get to learn until they were coming of age. And we'll say, oh, that's dirty dancing, because we're judging it from another culture, right?
So what happens when you start judging? You see the little green arrow there. It flips you back up. And that's where we were talking earlier, where this is a very fluid process that we're talking about, that we're thinking about, and that you can flip yourself back up into this. Help me remember what acrasia was again.
Acrasia.
Because they'll see that up there. I want to make sure everybody knows.
The lady from the Ibu, help me out here, guys. Ibu tribe. A professor that was at a conference that I presented a paper that we had written, but I was the only one that made it to the conference. You had something else going on at that time, family. And so I was presenting our paper down in New Orleans, and this lady, professor, and her graduate student from Nigeria presented this paper, and she used the word acrasia. She said, does anybody know that word? Well, I had Greek and Latin roots from Joseph Falls, so of course I raised my hand. And no one else had ever heard of acrasia. And acrasia it literally means that your bowels are not good. It means you've got something bad going on inside of you. But within the Igbo culture, they use that, and it's a biblical word as well, they use that to mean things are not so balanced in here. In other words, that you've got your bowels out of sort in your thinking and in your heart. So acrasia, for her, and she explained this to me, acrasia was a person that needs to get themselves right before they can help anyone else.
So if you look at our journey, it's flipping you back inward. Now, also I want you to look at that word ecology as we put up there instructional ecology. Go back to 8th grade biology and an ecosystem, because that's where we went. We started talking about in an ecosystem, how does that function? And how can we relate that then to the learning environment or to leadership? Well, back to this, we have our interdependency piece, a plant, right? You're a plant in an ecosystem. You're interdependent on the oxygen and the carbon monoxide and the water. So it's the relationship between that plant and everything else in the ecosystem. And because I'm a biologist in my first life, I was like, oh my gosh, we're running with that. Because that, to me, represents the best, well-balanced environment. Because if an ecosystem is balanced, everything is thriving.
Does anyone here speak Spanish? Any Spanish speakers?
No me gusto McDonald's?
Yeah, okay. When I was 11, or maybe I just turned 12. It was the summer that I was 11 and 12. And I was working in the grape harvest. That's when they found the skeletons of the boys that had been buried, who had protested the way they were being treated as workers. And I remember that my buddies were Hispanic, that I was kind of running with that summer. We always called ourselves a pack of wolves, lobos, And we watched each other's back in case the man came out there and wanted to beat us up because we had done something they didn't like. So we're always guarding each other's backs. And so their grandmother fed me that night because I wasn't quite sure where my people were. And they had kind of become my people for a while. And one of the little guys with them was getting picked on by this ranch owner's older, wasn't even a kid, he was a young man that was picking on him. And I came to his rescue and I got beat up because I wasn't that good a fighter. But anyway, So this grandmother adopted me and she fed me. And she making, anybody ever had menudo? Good stuff, right? You like comedy? Good stuff. And so she was singing this song. And I had heard the German version down in Texas of the same song. You know, alle meine Entchen schwimmen auf dem See, Kopfchen in dem Wasser, Schwatchen in dem Ho-Ho-Ho, Kopfchen in dem Wasser, Schwatchen in dem Ho. Any German speakers? Okay, then you know, little duckling, his head's down in the water, tail up in the sky. Okay, so I knew that song. But I'd never heard Todos los pollitos dicen pío pío, cuando tienen hambre, cuando tienen frío. And she sang the song and I didn't understand it. I knew some Italian, but you know, Italiano y Español son un poquito diferentes, see? So I knew kind of what she was singing, but I didn't know what alles was. And she said, oh, that's the covering, the room that the grandmother or the mother makes for the little ones when it's raining, when it's cold. She spreads her wings and makes a coat, a abrigo, for the little ones to get under. And she said, that's the Spanish grandmother song. And of course I thought of my granny, you know, and so I loved this woman immediately, right? And so, you know, Juanita Garcia became my temporary granny for a while, and she took care of me when I was hungry and sheltered me under her wings in her tent. So that was a common ground. Those people had grannies and mamas just like my people had grannies and mamas. Just like your people have grannies and mamas. Something we all have in common. We all understand what good grannies and good mamas are, don't we? So I understood that musically. She understood it scientifically. And she understands it in her family as well, because she got a great grandmother, great mama, still watching over her today. But you know, her grandmother at church, I would always sit in the last row and I'd be leaving. She would sit right where you're sitting, Dr. Crusher. She would always reach her hand out for my cheek, reach her hand out, and she would pull me in for a little kiss like this. And she'd kiss me on my beard, on my cheek, and she would whisper to me, pray for me. And I said, I will. And I said, pray for me. And she said, I do. So I knew I was covered by her prayers. So there is something, if nothing else, we can start with grannies and mamas if we're blessed to have a good one, right? Now, I've met some people that I would tell that story to, and they say, that story didn't work for me. My mother and my granny were hellcats on drugs, you know. And so when you work in the inner city, you have to be careful, because sometimes that story isn't a good story for some kids. Some people understand the idea of a terrarium and everything breathing for each other, the plants breathing for the little snake or the little lizard. Some people understand that, but some people want to spray DDT all over that stuff to up their yield, because the data says they're going to make a whole lot more money. Data doesn't tell them yet it's going to give their grandbabies cancer, because they're not looking to the 7th generation. So there's this dilemma that if we use only short-term data, if we don't look at the long-term wisdom and balance it with the short-term data, the profit, the test score, if we don't look at what we do to kids sometimes, like reducing the curriculum only to things that will be on their test, we kill the terrarium.
Or in a leadership model, if you only enhance what accreditation models come in and say you have to do, right? We've all been there where you kind of start to feel out of balance.
When I was, I can't remember what grade, I think it was 7th grade, I had Mrs. Reeves in Huntsville, Arkansas, and she taught me to diagram sentences. Bless her heart. My brain, Sue Ellen Reed tested me 3 times, and every time I came out the same. Whole brain with a left brain preference. No, I'm sorry, whole brain with a right brain preference. And to me, I had to take it to Gregoric and translate that from done and done to Gregoric. So I knew what that meant. It meant that I like to see the big picture, but then I like to put things, half-baked ideas into sequence. I like charts. I like graphic analyzers. You know, I'm one of those guys, if I can simplify it to 5 steps, I'll understand it. My wife called that white boy disease, okay? But, you know, I am. If I can get it in the 5 easy steps, I can do it. Now, what is the problem for some kids when you make them diagram a sentence? I mean, I understood it, and it helped me to understand what a complete sentence was, and it made me understand, you know, prepositional phrases, the difference between a direct object, indirect object. It's a real godsend later when I got into languages that had different cases for those things, and you had to know a different word for the for every case, right? You know, mit dem man, but not mit der man. So, you know, so for languages that actually have hard case words rather than just doing case by word position like English has done now, you know, the man kicked the ball, the man kicked the ball, the man kicked the boy the ball, the man kicked the boy. Very different sentences, right? By word order. We know which thing is accused of which thing is dated, just by word order. But most languages don't do that. So when we study another language, that becomes a very difficult concept. Wasn't for me, because I had Ms. Reeves with her stick that she'd whack you if you didn't diagram it right. I love diagramming sentences because it helped me to understand something that I would desperately need later. But the research said that probably only a fifth of us benefited from learning it that way, so they threw it out the window. Why didn't they keep it for that one little fifth of the students and use a differentiated approach with the other 4/5? Because the data didn't support it. The data didn't support it, so they threw it out the window. Now they say, oh, learning styles, that's old-fashioned. We're looking at, there's nobody that's totally left brain or totally right brain. You know, we can actually look at their brains. The neurological research doesn't support that some people are tactile, you know. And I think you're using a model from 1973. Have you seen the 24 learning style or 20?
20 or 21.
21 learning styles of done and done? You know, or have you ever tried to put a problem-solving group together with people that were all right-brained? Just because you wanted new ideas? You're going to have half-baked ideas all week long. Wonderful half-baked ideas, but you're never going to sequence them. You're never going to go get all the resource variables that those whole-brain left people, you know, get, or the people that are totally left-brained, the ones, and well, does that mean that it's only firing in the left brain the people who can make you finish and clean your desk off that day and have everything in a folder and get it in on time? You need that person. Does it mean they're only thinking their left brain? No. We use those terms loosely, and they get us in trouble with the researchers, right? When you go to the acupuncturist and he says he's going to affect the heart meridian, does it mean it's just affecting the scientific heart? No, that's a different cultural perspective. Liver meridian, heart meridian, those are 5,000 years old from the Yellow Emperor's medical journal, in which heart and liver meant something very different, right? So when we start always having to have a new idea, and the new boss has to have everything his or her way, and throw everything else out the window, I think that we both propose that is not a very good administrative tool, because there's some of the old stuff that you want to keep. You ever heard the idea of not cutting the tip off the roast? Do you come from a culture that has that story? Not cutting the tip off the ham? How many of you ever heard that story? You want to share that one? How do you remember it? Was that one of your grandmother's stories?
Yes. So it was a ham, and my grandmother would tell me a story about how she would sit and watch her mom when she was little, and her mom would cut like the very end of the ham off, put it in the pan, and bake it. And then they would eat it Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it was. And so when she got older, she would cut the end of the ham off, put it in the pan, and bake it, because she's following tradition. And they would eat it, and then my mom eventually would cut it, put it in the pan, and bake it. And my mom asked my dad asked my mom, why do you cut the end of the ham off? My mom said, well, because my mom did it, and her mom did it, and they all did it. So she called to find out why they did it, and they only did it because they didn't have a pan big enough to fit the whole ham in there. And they just kept doing it to follow tradition.
I learned that story from Rufus Conley, principal. I was his first white counselor at George Washington Carver High School when they were desegregating. in northern Houston. And he told me that story, and I said, oh my God, that's so true. That is better than any research I've ever learned. That some things we do, and they are valuable, even if they don't make sense data-wise, because they relate us to our grandma and to our mother. They are traditions. And so that's a perfect story for getting people to understand that some things count even if they can't be counted. And some things have meaning even if we can't find data to support them. If they mean something to your mind and your heart and your culture. And so that's part of this 5th curriculum. Tested curriculum is important. It's one piece of the pie. But you can't let that one little piece become the whole pie.
So we need your help. This is the first time we've talked out loud, besides our colleagues, Dr. Crusher, Dr. Green, Ms. Jones.
Dr. Falls.
Dr. Falls. We need your help. We want to hear what you have to say about this journey that we're thinking about. What are we missing? What do we need to add? Is there something up there that doesn't make sense?
Are there some people that maybe need not to learn things to take back and help their people? That they just need to be, Machiavelli said that, right? Machiavellian hero said, just do what profits you the most. Use everybody else. Do whatever it takes to win, to make a profit. Declare bankruptcy whether you need to or not. Let those workers starve. Not aiming that at any certain person. Okay? So, is there something that you think that we should be saying or talking about, or some questions that we could be asking? Are we ignoring in this journey of the person who first learns their own survival skills, but then somehow learn that they can take it back and share it? Any of you know the story of Oyesa? Also went by the name of Charles Eastman, not the one that invented the Kodak camera. The one who gathered the bodies at Wounded Knee.
The physician.
The physician, got his degree from Brown College, but never forgot that he was Lakota, never forgot that his father, who he thought had been dead, was in a Fort prison with only his eyes being able to see ground level for 7 years. And when they laid him out, he came home, he said, there's too many of them. I saw too many boots and wagons going by. We can't stop them. So go learn their ways. Go learn their ways excellently. But don't forget who you are. And so he took the photographer along to Wounded Knee when he gathered the bodies. He helped start Boy Scouts. He made sure that many of the wonderful ways of his people were taught to scouts of all cultures. How can we be excellent in 2 cultures? I want Dr. Cambiano to share with you an experience that she and I did together of touching some bricks and trying to imagine seminarians from 100 years, 120 years ago.
So he's touching me emotionally there, so I had to take a moment to be able to.
Sorry, she didn't know I was going to do this.
No, I had to take a moment to be able to put into words what he's describing. So I believe that Seminary Hall has a pulse. It actually vibrates so you can feel it. And I have always, since I've been here as a faculty, not as a student, I think as a student in my undergrad, I was still stuck in this self-centric mindset. So I didn't understand where I was then. But as a faculty member, and as I learned more about those that have walked before me, I came to understand the energy that is centered around that building. And Carla and I were having a conversation, and I said, whenever I have to make a hard decision, or if I'm struggling about a decision that was made that affects me, or just I need some extra guidance, I'll walk around Seminary Hall. And on my way here today, I actually walked through it, touching the bricks, pausing a moment to kind of feel that heartbeat that it has. And as we talked about this, he said, let's go on and follow me. Okay, field trip. Love field trips. Let's go. So we walk out to the columns, and he asked me to touch the female seminary column. And you know, this was when? Was this fall?
Mhm.
And I hadn't done this. I'd seen the columns. I'd walked around them. I've heard freshmen talk about don't walk through them, you know, just all these, but I hadn't touched the columns. And the experience of touching that particular, the female seminary column.
Now, I asked you to do something.
What did I miss?
As she touched it, I said, now close your eyes and imagine those young women in the late 1840s, early 1850s, coming here and having to learn. Well, actually, they didn't come there until 1888. They were out at Park Hill in 1851. But those bricks are from the original seminary. I said, imagine those young women touching those and coming to a place where they were going to have to learn to be, in the Cherokee tradition, dynamic, forceful leaders of their people, because the Cherokee have always thought that women had special leadership skills. But they were also going to have to learn to be Southern ladies in a culture where women were still thought to be the property of their husbands. And I thought, can you imagine the two different cultures they were going to have to lead in? Can you imagine what that must have been like? And she closed her eyes, and I could see she got a tear. And I said, you know, we've come a long ways in some ways, but in some ways we haven't come very far. And so you opened your eyes, you said, I could feel that. And I gave her a little quote from our culture. I said, even the rocks would cry out. Literally, you know, there's energy in everything. And so she experienced it, she felt it. And you still go over there and touch those. I see you out there. You know, and you don't have to be a woman, you don't have to be a Cherokee. Even old bald-headed white guys can learn if they open themselves up and feel that energy of what it must have been like to be one of those young women having to excel in two cultures. Can you imagine? You know, my life hasn't been tough anywhere like the toughness those women had to have. You know, even though I was poor, even though I was a dropout, even though I was uneducated, even though I didn't know who my father was, I still had the privilege of this color. So you think about that, and of this gender. And so I admire those women so much. It means so much to me. The spirit of this university teaches people who listen, who open themselves up. I think we're to the wrap up. Yeah, we have 1 minute. Last words. Last
words. I would ask you all to challenge yourselves to walk through this journey that we have presented to you. And as you walk out of the room and across campus or into your other little ecosystems, think about it and how and where you are in the journey. And if one night, as you think about this, that you think, that Carl and Renee, they're missing something here, let us know.
We are smarter together. then I am alone. We are co-scholars. We would love for you to be scholars with us on this journey.
And you know, the chief, Chief Baker, said that this morning. And I think it was echoed again from
You probably listened to his grandmother.
probably. You guys have a wonderful day. Thank you for spending this hour with us.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing your ideas.